Hi everyone. A quick note about today's episode. We recorded this about a month ago at MFF 2022. Please note that there are some audio issues throughout in terms of hearing questions from the audience. So we instead have a summary said back by the host and guest for the episode in many points. So if you're a little bit confused, essentially we are repeating back questions that were asked from the audience as best as we can. We've tried to salvage some of the audio from the guests in the audience, but your mileage may vary. Anyways, we hope you enjoy listening to the conversation. All right. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to the TFTuesday Podcast, coming to you on a Friday at MFF. Very excited to be here. Yeah. Woo!
The day has changed its identity just for us.
Yeah, exactly.
It is Tuesday now.
It is Tuesday, my dudes. Yeah, I'm really excited to be here. This is the first time that we're doing a podcast live, so there may be some technical difficulties for our listeners who end up hearing the recording, but for everyone in the room, you will hear us loud and clear.
Yeah.
Which is exciting. What? Talk louder. Yeah. Today, I have a familiar friend and guest here today.
Hi.
Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, I'm Toledo. If you've known me for an extra long time, you may have met me as a Gemsbok or as a horse, and if you met me in the last year, it'll be a panther. So, many faces. Gee, I wonder why I'm here.
Exactly. and Toledo's going to be like slowly TFing throughout the course of the panel. So, you know.
Yeah. What are these things?
Yeah, what are those? I don't know. Amazing. Amazing. Well, we have a great set of topics to get through today, but just as like kind of a note, if folks do have questions, we will take questions at the end, but also like if you have an urgent one, please feel free to put up your hand. We have a handy dandy mic here that you can speak your question into, if that's not too daunting. Also, obligatory note, we are recording this podcast, so if you don't want to be like heard in any way, you don't have to say anything, but just as a note for everyone's awareness, this will be posted later online. But yeah, I figured, since it's our first time doing a panel at a con, we'll start at kind of ground level and go from there. So, you'd think this would be an easy question to answer, but we've parsed so many nuances around, I think, this central question of like what is and isn't transformation. So I think it's worthwhile to explore. So I guess my first question is kind of, how would you define the topic of transformation, Toledo?
How would I? I was actually just thinking about this afternoon, and I realized that a lot of what we talk about in terms of transformation in the fandom is changes in a person's body or thought process that are unnatural in some way. Either impossible in waking reality, or impossibly quick, or just or hard to imagine. I mean, if we talk about, say, like personality transformation, there are people who do change personality due to, head injuries or, other things that happen in life, or just, maturing over time.
Yeah.
But it's rare that it is quick and in a narratively satisfying manner.
Yeah, I feel like the narratively satisfying manner is a key part of it oftentimes. And it's interesting because, I think that when we think about TF broadly, a lot of times our minds are kind of drawn to like the more like quote unquote stereotypical, like I am becoming an animal, I am becoming an anthro, maybe I'm becoming an object. Like there's like very like specific things that people think of when we talk about transformation, but it can also be like so much broader. I mean, there's definitely some that we've talked about, like, is putting on your clothes a TF? And I know you think that's a yes, so...
In certain ways, yes. If you didn't hear that episode, I went on a long spiel about enclothed cognition. I won't repeat it here, but Google it. It's really cool.
It is really
and
cool.
It might convince you.
Yeah. But it's interesting because, like, when we talk about things like transformation, obviously, not to gatekeep, but, like, words do need to mean something. And so it's always interesting, like, where do we actually put the definition? Like, where do we put the line between, like, what is transformation and what is just, like, an interesting thought experiment? I don't know. Like, do you have any thoughts around that?
I think we can use different definitions for different purposes.
That's true.
That's one way I often approach these things. There are uses to them. If we're talking about a transformation story, for instance, we might mean you get introduced to a character. There's an inciting incident. Oh no, they're changing, and then the story ends.
Right.
But speaking more broadly, it might be a little different.
Yeah.
So we have to our definition might have to metamorphose.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, hey, again, like I think one of the interesting things about the community as well is that, we ourselves come into things with like a bit of a preconception as to what transformation is. And then you come into this very wide fandom and there's all these different perspectives on it that you get introduced to, and then you can change your mind. Or in some cases, you just like have your like initial thoughts validated as well, right?
Yeah. So 2 questions for you. How would you define it? And what were your preconceptions?
Oh, okay. You're putting me on the spot. I was trying to avoid that. I mean, I think broadly speaking, my definition of transformation is at its core, there is a person who undergoes some sort of radical change, be it within their mind or within the self or in like their physical being. I think that a lot of times when we talk about transformation, we discount to some degree like the mental aspects and such. And I think that there's things like character growth, I will die on this hill, that they are transformation to a degree. And I think that if you think about that concept within that definition, there's a lot of really interesting narratives that then get caught under the umbrella. And I'm not personally someone who wants to necessarily be restrictive, but I did mean what I said earlier too. Like we do need to have, like words need to mean things, and we do need to actually like nail things down as a definition. But there is something nice to, have different takes on what that means within the fandom. We have a question actually. Would you like to come up and take the microphone?
I was just going to say that the transformation is the end of the old and the birth of the new.
What was the second thing you asked me?
What were your preconceptions about transformation and how have they changed?
Yeah, I mean, when I came into like the transformation community back in 2006, don't tell me the math on that. I mean, a lot of it, drink. I think that a lot of what I thought was transformation was like very stereotypical, like were creatures. That was like my idea of transformation. It was just that. And then, you start browsing on things like Transfer or Fur Affinity or all these other sites, and you're like, oh, there's people who like classify this as like turning into like other creatures. It's not like, dictated by the moon, or, oh, this person's turning into a table. I didn't even think of that. Why is that doing things to me? Like stuff like that. Your mind kind of like broadens. So anyways, I think that the community actually very much changed what I see as my definition of transformation. And I mean, I'm very thankful for that because it expanded my horizons. So
cool. I'll answer some of mine. I started finding transformation-themed stuff online in 2001, before 9/11.
Spicy.
My interest is old enough to drink, so I remember like just typing in transformation in the like pre-Google Stone Age search engines, and being surprised when I found like workout tips. I quickly learned that I needed to type in animal transformation to get anything close. And if you were around during that time, like, it was really hard to find anything. You would type in werehorse in, Alta Vista or what have you, and just, like, come up with the same 5 things for, like, months on end, just hoping that something new would come up. And if you weren't around, you have no idea how good you have it.
Yeah. We're old. Sorry, continue.
But yeah, it's not only just is there a wide range of stuff, even outside the furry fandom. Like, a lot of what confused me when I was looking for stuff was just humans. Changes in human bodies. But yeah, I've gotten to the point where, like I mentioned, enclosed cognition. Like, if we talk about how we change our behaviors, what we wear can change it. Yeah. It doesn't even have to be something as drastic as a fursuit. It can be, a different shirt, a different pair of pants, what have you.
Yeah.
No pants.
Yes, no pants. So then I guess, to speculate like really broadly, I'm curious to know, like, what do you think is the central pull that draws most like TF fans in? Like, how would you explain the appeal to a non-TF person, perhaps from your own perspective?
Ooh, do you mind if we ask for a couple options?
Yeah, sure.
Like we won't have you come up here, but you could say it and we can repeat it into the microphone.
Yeah. Does anyone have any thoughts on what the central pull is of TF?
Hand in the back. Exploring new situations, exploring new ideas, things you may never have considered. Great,
Yeah,
thank
that's
you.
good. Exploration of self-identity, yeah. A lot of wish fulfillment. Mood. Being free of the desolate, horrible human body.
Over here.
Yeah, the sexual element too, of the thrill of feeling your body change. Yeah, I mean, all of these are good options.
Were there any others?
Oh.
Yes.
Yeah, the change in how people treat you in the before and after. That's a great one. Thank you. Oh, your own abilities before and after. That too. Yeah.
Yeah, one of the things that the first transformation media I think I found online was on a website called draconic.com. I was looking up images of dragons, and the keeper of the site had written a story wherein he transformed gradually into a dragon, and there were like great descriptions of flight, which were really cool to
nice.
read from a first-person perspective.
Yeah. No, that's great. Well, then you've avoided enough. What would you say is the central pull for you, Toledo?
I think it comes down to a couple of the things that were already mentioned. Getting new abilities and new ways of perceiving the world and even interacting with it, in both the bodily and the social realms. So, as an instance of something I can do while still possessing a human body, back at one of my first conventions, 8+ years ago, a friend of mine gave me a chance to try on a fursuit. It fit terribly. He was over 6 feet tall. I am not. But I got to walk around about 20 minutes as like an Arctic unicorn and see how people interacted with the costume without having any idea who I was behind it. That was really fascinating. It was cool to be in a crowd and be unperceived. And I think that explains some of my interest in this. Like, that changed the way there was interaction there.
Yeah. So basically, you were literally the meme of like, "Do not perceive me" in that moment.
Yeah. And I literally have a badge in which I'm invisible now.
Yeah, I'm sensing a theme. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's awesome. I know, like, for me in particular, I think the central draw has always been the idea of experiencing the other, both in ways that maybe could be accessible to some degree, and in the fantastical and impossible. Oh, sorry, you're going to say something.
Yeah, if you're through, I have another one that no one mentioned. So one of the things that really drew me into transformation as a theme was learning about comparative anatomy. Just like, I remember learning to draw and seeing that I had to learn animal anatomy to get this stuff in, and realizing that we basically had all the same parts. There are some differences. Sometimes there are more of one sort of bone than another. Sometimes there are like glands or what have you that we don't have. But we come from the same roots. We have a lot of the same parts. And just seeing how those things branched out on the evolutionary tree and imagining how you could do a spectrum of changes from one to the other was so fun and inspiring. Like, I could go on and on about how much that is cool to me.
Yeah.
To know that, like, a whale's flippers has 5 fingers inside it that we don't see.
Yeah. They're invisible.
Yeah, they are.
We've tied it back. Oh, I see there's a question in the back.
Yeah.
you wanna repeat
The
that?
horse hoof is very weird because it's the middle finger. I would demonstrate, but I'm not a horse, and it might be misperceived.
It's true. It's true.
It lost all the others.
Yeah. I will also just say, I think, and I guess this is also like a part of the personal appeal for me, but I think the ability to also like conceptualize yourself outside of like our like traditional sense of gender has always really been interesting to me. And I know that, in terms of grappling with my own identity, that transformation played a really big part of that. And I probably wouldn't have come to as speedy a conclusion on where I fell there without transformation. So I think that, transformation, it's not only just an interesting kind of topic or trope that can come up within stories. It can also be something that we can really self-actualize in our own lives and use to better ourselves. And I think that's what I think makes transformation so special sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. And one way I think transformation even... Actually, here's a side question. So in the furry fandom, we all have experience imagining ourselves in different bodies. We all have an idea of ourselves in a different form that we like imagining and presenting to others and having interacted with us. What do you think distinguishes people who are interested in transformation within the furry fandom from just furrydom in general?
I mean, that's a very good question. I think one of the central things when I've chatted with like furs who are not into TF, one of the things that comes up quite commonly is that they're not necessarily interested in the process of getting there. They would just really like to be in that form, and not even like necessarily like go from what they are now to that, but just to have always been that. So there's not really a focus on, like I'd really love to like experience changing into that and then like feel the elation of being that. No, the elation comes from just having been that always. And I think that that's a really interesting way to think about it as well, because it does play into some degree to the whole like enclosed cognition in terms of how we interact with it in the here and now. But I think for a lot of them in the moment, they would like to just skip all of that and just be that as they were always. And, you can argue that has at least like TF vibes to some degree, but like, it is, I think, fundamentally separate from transformation.
Yeah, that makes sense. Everyone else is sipping TF LaCroix. As we mentioned before.
It's true.
So actually building on that, I was just describing my photo manipulation process and history to a friend the other day. And I noticed that, like, even though most of the art that I do now is just depicting anthropomorphic characters, like I haven't depicted mid-transformation scenes in a while. But still, the people who have commissioned me have been people who are interested in transformation as a theme. I think it's really interesting that the people who want to see their bodies shifted into a form through this like Photoshop process are the people who are interested in the shift, even though the final product gives no evidence of it. And that's kind of different from paint-overs, where people just draw on top of one. And I think that might be an example of what you're talking about. People who have an interest in the process in addition to the final product.
It's all about the vibes, baby. All about the vibes. It comes down to the vibes. So, then TF as an interest almost inherently comes with the fandom to some degree, like we were just saying. How would you suggest people like who are maybe curious about it get into it, or like find a niche of folks that they would vibe with? Because I think that finding that space that you can kind of make your own and also make your own within the fandom, it can be incredibly difficult. And I feel like a lot of people kind of struggle around in the dark and then finally find the place. But is there any tips you would say in terms of finding that?
I mean, one would be produce content of whatever sort you're comfortable with. If you create stuff, you will like attract people who like the stuff that you create. Now, they might like it for different reasons than you do, and you'll just have to kind of discern who you might want to interact with from that subset.
Yeah.
But that's one way of doing it. And now, I guess discoverability is harder now that there are just so many people, but it is a way to do it. And I found that, like, transformation stuff goes farther than just furry stuff.
Yeah.
One person needs to find it, and then they will retweet it into oblivion, and you won't even know what's happening. You will have transformed into a poppy fur overnight.
Is that the TF we're peddling now? The poppy fur TF?
Yeah. You'll be Elphaba, we'll be Galinda, we'll give you a makeover.
Oh my god,
You're going to be poppy fur. We'll teach you all about poppy fur.
We're showing our inner theater nerds now. You know that, right? No, that's a great point. And I think as well, like, it's definitely, I think, easier to find others who are into the same things as you if you are kind of producing content of some sort. And obviously, drawn, written, like there's so many different ways you can approach it, and obviously we all have our own inherent like skills, and so there can be unique challenges in terms of producing anything in those lenses. But I do agree, like if you are producing something, you will probably have an easier time kind of gravitating towards the people that you want to meet. And I will say, and this is the benefit of being old, like it is definitely harder these days to build up that community. Even now, like, as I've like moved through spaces, I've noticed it's harder to find new people sometimes when there's more people than ever before. And so like it seems like it's a paradox, and maybe this is also just a function of our spaces are not our own to reflect on a past episode, and like we always have to pick up shop and move somewhere new because of the whims of billionaires and bullshit like that. So it can be so difficult to like nail down that community and build those friendships. So I don't know, it's tough. It's a tough question.
Another thing that I would mention, we'll get to your comment, is that one of the blessings of social media is that you can see who's interacting with the stuff you like.
Yes.
So go to stuff you like, see who's replying, see who's liking, like do some stalking, and you might find your best friends.
Maybe don't stalk.
Not literally.
Yeah, not literally. Don't do literal stalking, friends.
Sorry, I'm a Panther. I can't help but recommend this as a process.
Fair enough.
What was your comment, by the way?
Yeah,
to repeat it, look for Discord servers, Telegram groups of artists and people you already like, and you'll go from there. Yeah, I think that's great.
Yeah, that's always a really good option. Another one. How big of a transformation community is there on Reddit? Well, if you listen to our backlog of episodes, there is in fact a TFIRL subreddit that has a lot of people on it. So you can always check that one out. There's actually a number of Reddit communities. I will confess, I'm not a Redditor myself. I have had bad experiences there, but there's plenty of people who have had good ones. And so there are definitely a number of different subreddits in particular that you can always meet people into. And they have Discords as well. So everyone likes Discord these days. So that's always handy.
Discord, an MLP character notably into transformation of things and composed of multiple animal parts.
Now you're showing your horse roots.
What?
So I guess maybe to shift topics a little bit, like we are here at MFF, potentially the largest FurCon if the numbers hold up the way I think they are going to. Sorry, AC. I think a common question that people have, when they come to a convention, it is like, online in the real world, and they want to like try and make those connections. And I know we've kind of covered this topic to some degrees in the past, but like I think we have new questions to ask. So, I was interested to know like what sort of things do you like to do when you're at conventions, and are there specific things that TF folks tend to do that you think is worthwhile in your opinion?
Go to Zaleppo's TF meet and greet.
This is all a self promotion, baby. I am. Anyway, sorry. Continue. Sorry.
No, one thing that I like about his things is that he organizes it by theme and lets people have some agency in how they self-organize in the meet and greet. It's a very useful system. And you can find people who are interested in stuff you are interested in, and you don't have to look at a whole room of folks. I know one time I went to a convention and looked at the transformation meet and greet, and I looked in the room and it was a circle of chairs, and everyone was going around and introducing themselves and saying what they liked one by one for an hour. And I noped out of there.
Yeah, real fast.
Another thing, I like doing art with folks. It's fun. Just random sketch ideas. And you can do that at the meet and greet. There are other events where you can do that.
There's a TF Art Jam actually at MFF as well this year. So that's on Sunday. So if that's something of interest, yeah, it's organized. Also, there's like informal stuff, obviously, which is like, I think also what you're alluding to.
Yeah. In case you didn't think of this idea, you can hang out with your friends, too, at conventions.
What?
And talk about things.
What? You're lying. I've never done that before. Tell me more.
Yeah, friends are people that you like and that like you.
Oh my god.
And that want to spend time with you.
This is revolutionary. Thank you. I didn't know about this before.
This is why you came here.
Yes. We're going to find the definition of friends.
Friendship is TF magic.
Yes. Oh my god. How many MLP jokes are you going to sneak in here?
20% more.
Oh god. Do you think there are any like do's and don'ts of kind of navigating the like online but in real life vibes of a con? Because I feel like sometimes when you're trying to like, for example, you're like, oh, I really want to meet this person and I don't really know them and like I don't even know how to like introduce myself in a way that's not creepy. Like, how do you navigate that?
Communicate your relationship to the person, noting that it's probably parasocial.
Yeah.
Like, I have watched you. I have seen everything that you've made for the past 5 years. I didn't know what you looked like until now.
Yes, communicated in that literal way. It'll go very well. It'll go super well.
Sorry, I am getting a little loopy. I guess, yeah, going loopy is a TF vibe.
Yeah, that is a TF vibe. I mean, I would generally say that, and of course, with all of these, your mileage may vary, so, take them with a grain of salt. But one of the things that I've found that is super helpful is, first of all, it's always better to kind of approach when there's like a group event. So, like the TF meet and greet, that is a good example. And just like find a way to kind of like contribute to the ongoing conversation that's happening. And then maybe, if you are noticing like that the vibes are in fact good and, there's like back and forth, then you can maybe proceed to be like, oh, by the way, I love your stuff or something like that. And then, go from there. Definitely like, please don't corner artists like and be like, I love your stuff so much. It's changed my life. I'm going to talk about it with you for 10 minutes because that can be very intimidating.
Unless they like that.
I mean, hey, everyone, different strokes for different folks. But I know myself personally, I would freak out a little bit. So,
I had someone at a recent convention. I like showed my badge, and he was like, "Oh, I wrote a story about that." I was like,
"What?"
Yeah. I was like, "Oh, I love that piece." I'm like, "Cool."
Did you go back and read it after?
I couldn't find it.
Oh, you couldn't find it. Fair enough.
But I like when people express enthusiasm. But it has to be, calibrated to how they know me.
Yeah, I agree. I think one of the best things that I can recommend, I'll get to that in a second. I think one of the best things I can recommend is matching the energy of the person that you're speaking with. And I know that sounds kind of nebulous, but I promise you it is a thing and it does happen in real life. Like you can usually get somewhat of a sense as to like the vibes of another person, and matching them I think generally is the easiest way to like start a conversation and actually talk about things that are meaningful. Oh, that's a great one. Yeah, exactly. To summarize, what you were saying was basically that, it's really helpful when you approach an artist to mention what your favorite piece is, and that can be a jumping point into having further discussion. And maybe you can talk about things like the themes or like what it was about the piece that really attracted you to it. And that can be a genuine, like a meeting of the minds, like that's common ground kind of thing. I think I saw another hand in the back, unless I'm going crazy. Am I TFing into seeing hands? Okay, we're good. But yeah, no, I think that's a really great point too. I've definitely done that before myself, and it's a very helpful point.
One thing that I like about that suggestion is that it keeps the initial interaction limited, and so it gives the opportunity to expand if they want, or you've just like communicated it clearly, and you're great.
Yeah,
I love hearing people who have liked my stuff, and that just well another thing about it is it conveys respect.
Yes.
And again, matching the vibes,
Yeah.
Transform your social presence.
Yes, match the vibes. It's all about the vibes. Another thing that I kind of wanted to touch on, because I know we haven't really talked about it before, when you have to like commission art in person at a convention, it is so daunting for people, like especially when it's something in the niche like transformation. It's like so hard to figure out like how to communicate that, especially if like you have to like articulate it in words and say the things that you like about the transformation. So I was curious, how would you recommend someone like approach that situation so that both they and the artist comes away satisfied?
Okay, I have to admit, I am somewhat unqualified to answer this because I've never commissioned something at a con.
Oh, really?
Or in person, and I have never been commissioned for transformation stuff at a con. So I would be happy to hear experiences that have gone well for other folks, and we'll keep them short, maybe about 2 sentences, and we'll relay them into the microphone.
Does anyone have any thoughts? Yeah, to summarize back, I completely agree. Go in with an idea of what you want. Having some references can be really helpful for the artist. If you're not sure if the artist is willing to do that or not, just be polite and respectful in terms of asking what you would like. And, artists are professionals and they will be able to tell you either, yes, I'm comfortable with that, or no, they're not. And you'll get the vibe pretty quickly. Yeah, no, that's a great point. If you are working with an artist potentially who is comfortable with the idea of transformation and is also cool with vague things, you can then just pitch a vague thing and they will do it for you because they do transformation and that's their expertise, baby. In the back. That's a great point. Yeah, so to summarize, when you are going to commission an artist, you will often see their displayed works, at the place that they are working, and also what they're currently working on, and that can help you give you a vibe of what it's like. It is basically window shopping, and that can be a very useful thing. And as you said, if you're daunted by having to, articulate the words, you can always be like, hey, can I message you the idea, be it on Telegram or somewhere else? And if the artist is comfortable with that, then that can make things a lot easier. And frankly, it can make it a lot easier to send things like references and such and really ease along the process. I will say I have actually commissioned quite a bit of art at conventions myself. I really do like physical media. I'm old. And, it's really nice to have that physical piece of paper. So something that I've always found really helpful is, going in someone said earlier, going in with exactly the idea you want. I'm the type of person who I will write out my thing in advance, and then I will approach and I'll be like, hey, this is the thing with all of the details and all of the references. Is this something you're willing to do? And then it's a lot easier for an artist to go yes or no. That I have found has always been super helpful for me. The other thing I will say is that if you are comfortable with giving an artist more freedom, like another person here said earlier, I sometimes have gone in and be like, hi, I know you do transformation. I'm willing to give you artistic license here. Would you be able to depict this kind of a transformation at this kind of stage? And then just let them go wild.
Yeah.
It is, I will just say, being able to see those results live is absolutely wild. It's really incredible. And there's something really meaningful about it too, in my opinion. So I've always been very grateful and very thankful for the artists who are gracious enough to do that work on the spot, because it's also very intensive and intense to do commissions at a convention. I tried to do it once myself. I will never do that again. So, I have a lot of respect for the people who can do that, because it really shows the level of skill that they have to be able to do that. I have one question here and then there, so we'll go to this one first. The vibes. Yeah, that's a great point. So what you were saying was essentially that when you go to look to commission transformation art, it can be good to commission something that can be left more as an interpretation up to the reader or artist, and that can ease things along. That's a great point too. Yeah, that's a great point as well too. If you don't know the artist as well and you're not as sure what they're willing to do, it's always good to start with a more generalized idea, as you mentioned, turning into a fox or something, before you go to something a little more niche, like turning into an airplane or turning into a pool toy or something like that. So, the second part added in by me, but anyways. So then I guess another question I have for you, Toledo, is, what advice would you pass on to past you when it came to embarking on your first convention experience, specifically as it pertains to navigating TF space? Because you have a lot of knowledge now, and I'm sure there are things that you would have told your past self to maybe look out for, or maybe not do or do when you were embarking on that.
I think my first experience at the con this way actually turned out pretty well. I went to the same convention where I got to try on a fursuit for the first time. I organized a little art jam. Unofficial, it wasn't on the schedule, but we printed out little flyers and we found a little table space. And what we did was we took papers and we passed them around and all drew a little sketch on them. And that was a really fun way to do it. It was a low barrier to entry, low stakes. Everyone is just doing something silly that they enjoyed, and then, I posted it online. As for others, it's like, just find the folks whose vibes you like, I think.
We really like the vibes here today.
Yeah. Take a look at their aura, see that it's the right color.
Now we're getting real esoteric.
No, it's people can like the same things for different reasons, and that's fine. But if there can be incompatibilities there.
Yeah,
and so you need to just and meeting someone in person can be a good way to do that, especially if it's in a group setting.
Yeah.
So like use the opportunity to find those people.
We have a person friend.
I can vouch for that too. Just in general, like especially within TF as like a general subculture, like you're gonna find people that you super vibe with.
Yeah.
People that you might not want to hang out with literally at all. Like your interests just might not line up. So like kind of feel it out. Like talk to different people, and like it's not really a big deal if you talk to somebody for a little bit and you're like, just don't super gel. Like that's fine.
Yeah.
Like, it's not the person that you want to hang out with. Like
Yeah.
there's a ton of different TF people.
Oh,
a
yeah.
ton of different like outlets of everything.
Yeah.
You'll find the people that you want to hang out with eventually, and like that's really I think when the best kind of con experience happens. Is
Yes.
when you actually get to the point where like you're finding those people who really sort of gel with you and like you actually get along with, rather than kind of like forcing yourself sort of into like a vibe just because you're trying to like when you're trying to find the people that like are into the same things as you. A lot of times it can get really like I don't know, subconscious. You worry about it, but I promise there's always somebody out there that's like on the same level as you, wants sort of the same sort of thing that you want.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
To reiterate to the listeners, what you were saying about how, like there are different kinds of people, and sometimes you'll just have to try out speaking to different people and finding out who you vibe with and who you don't. And it's okay. You're not going to vibe with everyone, but you will eventually find the kind of people who you can have that more in-depth discussions and, build up like rapport and friendships from there. So I think that's a really great point as well. I think I didn't give my answer. I mean, I guess if I had to give advice to like my past self in terms of going to conventions, which actually hasn't been for that long, but anyways, if I was going to go back to 2018 Zil, I mean, I would definitely, to echo some of these points here, like talking to more people is always a better way to find the people who you do vibe with. I know I myself in particular have always been the kind of like social butterfly of like wanting to talk to all the people and like going around and meet all the people. So like that at least I did always have inherently, but I also think that one of the things that maybe hasn't been said yet is, it can be really daunting to come to a convention in person and meet all these different people, and you can kind of second guess yourself as to what kind of persona you kind of put on. I think a lot of people, when they come to a convention, they feel like I need to present a certain version of myself, TF. I need to present a certain version of myself because this is the one that I think the most amount of people are going to want to see. And I understand that approach, and like, obviously from like a politeness respect level, yes, you should do that. But if you are kind of playing up certain things that aren't really truly you, it is sometimes to your detriment in the long term, because you're setting yourself up to continue to play a part that maybe you're going to grow apart from really quickly. So being as authentic, I think, as you can in that moment, obviously, like there's still stuff we are all learning about ourselves and we will all grow and change as people, but being able to put on the most authentic display of who you are to other people is definitely going to serve you the best in the long term, because you're meeting people where they are as well. You're being open and honest about what you're interested in and why you want to be here and why you want to be in these different conversations. And that can really make a world of difference in terms of deepening relationships at conventions.
Yeah, and related to that, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of the relationships that we start nowadays are parasocial first.
Yes.
We like see their stuff online, and like since very few people actually manage to have multiple Twitter accounts for like personal versus art stuff, you get a whole like fire hose of their personal thoughts and feelings alongside their sketches.
Not me, baby. Sorry, continue.
Okay, maybe I'm just describing myself and how I use Twitter. But people might know you better than you ever know them, or like they might only see the you that you present on social media, and that change from parasocial to social is a weird one. It's a space that you need to negotiate, and I think we've had a lot of great comments about how to do that here. Follow your vibes, and also, like, if people don't want to engage, if it's an artist who turns down a commission, or if it's a person who just, like, doesn't necessarily want to be your friend, would rather just, like, have the distance of a parasocial relationship, it's important that we acknowledge that.
Yeah, and respect that, I think. Yeah, I think a lot of times people feel like a level of ownership over other people that is, like, not good. Like, at the end of the day, we all are people, and there's always, like, there's nothing that is, like, fully virtual, to quote another past guest. Like, we all, like, everything is IRL. And if someone has decided that they don't want to engage with you, you really do need to be respectful of that. Because, as well, like, if you persist in doing things and you have bad vibes, people will know about the bad vibes, and you do not want to give off bad vibes.
Well, to that point, like, I've definitely had a lot of people, like, commissioners and stuff, will have come up to me at conventions, like, introduce themselves, like, want to talk and everything. I'm a very socially awkward person, so in the moment, I might be very like, oh, hey, like, great to meet you, I have to, like, go do this thing. It's nothing, like, there's no personal anything, it's literally just, like, I just don't really like talking to random people that much, like, even if you're a commissioner or somebody I work with, like, I might not necessarily in that moment want to, like, be super social and talk to people. Like, I do very much appreciate like, you coming up to me. Like, every single person that I've ever worked with, like, I really appreciate that moment of, like, oh, I'm glad that, like, I made an impact on you. But if you, like, come up to me and introduce yourself, I may not necessarily be the most receptive in the moment, but I promise, like, that kind of interaction, it's not, if I'm ever weird, it's not an indicative thing of, like, oh, you're, like, not, like, doing great, or interaction. Like, sometimes people just, like, in the moment, especially artists, like, a lot of artists I know, we're all very, like, weird people. Like, you come and talk to us, we're like, oh god, social. So, like, it's never, like, a personal thing, and, like, sometimes, like, for the most part, as far as I know, everybody that I know is, like, we do appreciate it, but sometimes in the moment we might not be, like, the most, like, oh my god, yay, oh my god, let's talk for, like, 10 hours.
So to summarize that, especially for artists, meeting people who have commissioned you or who you've interacted with can be really fulfilling, but it also will not necessarily be reciprocated socially, simply because of how people interact. So that doesn't mean that they don't appreciate you. It just means that the type of relationship might be different. Is that a fair summary? So thank you very much. People can be appreciative, people can like giving you compliments, but that doesn't give you authority or license to invite yourself to their lunch or, like, follow them around for the entire con.
Yeah, please don't do that. Please, I've had it happen before too.
Unless they consent to it.
Yeah, that's different, obviously.
How do you say no?
Actually,
you say no. I mean, sorry.
How do you say no? No, thank you is one way, or just like, I really appreciate it, I have other things to do. One way that I do as an artist is I put in my terms and conditions that I can turn down a commission proposal for any reason without specifying the reason. That way I don't have to, like, say, this particular thing makes me uncomfortable. I can just say, sorry, I can't take this commission at the time.
Yeah. And you can apply that to real life too, to some degree. Like, sometimes it's like, hey, I need to get going. It's great to see you. I'm going to head out. And, like, people really should respect those boundaries. Again, it is a navigation of social relationships that can be tricky for some. And, like, I do want to, like, acknowledge that, like, these situations can be incredibly difficult for people, especially people who have social anxiety. And so, you know, it's just really important to be as respectful as possible in these interactions, and also respect other people's boundaries, because, again, to touch on the whole parasocial thing, like, there can be, like, a perceived friendliness based on, you know, knowing them online, but that does not mean that you know the person in real life.
A really big thing to that too is also knowing that, like, if you're meeting up with somebody for the first time, or, like, you meet an artist that you really like, just, like, ask, basically.
Yes.
Like, recently I had an interaction online where somebody messaged me first before they commissioned me, asked me if I'd be okay with the material that they wanted to commission. I wasn't, but turned them down politely. I was just like, hey, I'm not really comfortable with this content, but thank you for asking first. And they were very receptive to it. They were like, oh, thank you for at least, not being super mean about it or turning me down politely and everything else. And I think a lot of people tend to worry that asking first can get a really negative reaction, whereas if you just approach kindly and ask ahead of time, a lot of times people will be a lot more receptive. Even if they don't necessarily want to go along with what you're asking, they'll have a much more positive reception of you in their memory and everything, looking back on it, being like, oh, well, this person was really polite and approached me first and asked.
Yeah.
Even if it's commissioning, if it's hanging out, anything else, just don't force yourself upon the other person.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't put them in a position where they're going to be uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Summary, basically, ask first. Feel free to ask, and please accept the answer when it's turned down. But the question itself, if I might reflect back, shows that you are respecting that. And hopefully it is. Hopefully it's not manipulative. Also, welcome to the TFTuesday Podcast, where we teach you how to be human.
Thank you. Thank you.
No.
Thank you for making that joke. I being cognizant of time, I wanted to move on to our kind of last topic before we get to questions. And that is related to telling TF adjacent stories, or stories where the narrative has TF, but it isn't necessarily about TF. We're all familiar with kind of the archetypal TF story, as you kind of said earlier, of there's a setup, there's a prolonged description of bodily changes, and then there's maybe an epilogue, or maybe more if you want to focus on the post-TF, where the viewpoint character tries to kind of understand themselves and what they're grappling with now. But what changes, though, when the transformation process moves from being the focus of the story to a sidebar? What aspects do you think of transformation then stand out when it's not actually the central focus?
I think it allows you to explore, depending on the type of transformation, it allows you to explore what it's like to be an embodied person in the world, or an embodied insert thing here in the world.
Pool toy.
Yes, we don't have any major motion pictures depicting what it is like to be an embodied pool toy in the world, but wait until 2057.
It better not be that long. I will not let it be that long. I have something to say about that.
Or not only an embodied person, but also maybe a different person. There's a novella that I listened to recently, a Brandon Sanderson one called The Emperor's Soul, that had kind of TFE vibes. It was in this, there are magicians called forgers who can make stamps that change the essence of something, whether it's an inanimate thing or even an animate being. Mm-hmm. And a lot of it was exploring what it means to be a particular person, what it means to be a particular thing. Now, there wasn't much change in there, but there was a lot of thought about it. Yes, in the back.
Yeah, that's a great point, actually. To summarize, so our friend in the back there mentioned both Shrek and Beauty and the Beast, and how the transformation is in some ways also more symbolic, and it's all more about the overarching stuff that happens to the characters and how that moves forward the plot and how that affects the people themselves as well. Mm-hmm. I think that's a really great point too. There is a lot of reflection on the self that you can do when the TF isn't just the focus. And I mean, look, as TF fans, we're always going to really, really read into that point, and maybe that wasn't necessarily the point that the writer wanted to get across anyways, but still there's a lot that can still be mined there from a analysis of the narrative perspective and all the different readings you can do of them. Mm-hmm. I always think about there's plenty of movies that come out that later on you can do a queer film analysis on, mm-hmm. for example, and that isn't necessarily what the writer necessarily had in mind. It might have been, but mm-hmm. it isn't necessarily. And I think that even if that's so, that doesn't take away from the validity of the analysis that you can do based on it.
Need to come up with more examples of these TF adjacent stories.
Yeah, I mean, Little Mermaid's actually. Yeah,
there you go.
That's a good one.
Yeah, where most the change is kind of instantiated. It is a pivotal moment
Yes.
in the film, but it's mostly about this person trying to find where they belong. It's an exploration of identity, what's important, what family versus, one's dreams, like how to reconcile incompatible parts of one's soul.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, to summarize, transformation is really versatile.
Yeah.
There are many ways that it can be used. It's a useful narrative tool to explore a lot. And
I thought of another one, actually.
Yes, go ahead.
I was going to say and this is a kind of an interesting one. In Mulan, there is very much a focus on a gender transition of sorts and presenting as a different gender and then navigating the world.
Enclothed cognition.
Yes, it is. It is. And, like that one in particular is... I mean, it doesn't necessarily have as nuanced a critique on gender as I might like, but it has a lot of interesting things to say within the context of that. And that is obviously not a movie that you would go, oh yeah, there's TF in that movie. But there's a lot that can be said around that, and how, someone who then goes about experiencing the world in a different presentation, not only does it change her own character, it also changes the characters around her as well, and how they view different things. So there's something to be said around that as well, I think, in terms of reflecting on the journey of the characters and thinking about how they have changed and maybe TF themselves moving forward. So
yeah, that's a great one. Not only because it illustrates my hobby horse, but one thing that I was going to mention is looping back to our definitions of transformation thing. The thing that I thought of where that transformation involves something kind of unnatural in many cases. Transformation is a versatile tool because there are all sorts of natural transformations that we go through.
Yeah.
But transformation media allows those changes or things parallel to them to happen quickly and in a narratively satisfying way. You want to explore the changes you're going through as a teenager? Congratulations, you have a werewolf story or something like that.
Yeah.
Oh no, you're have these weird urges periodically. What are you going to do with them?
Everyone's going, yes!
You're running around in the night. You have no idea who you are. That's what you get. Or other natural changes would be moving to a new place and having to find new friends. You talk about how The Little Mermaid is a way of expressing that kind of social transition, but through a transformation. Aging. It's not only puberty, it's also getting old. What do we do when our bodies start changing in ways that we don't like, and are entirely involuntary?
I do not like the back TF I'm undergoing right now. It sucks.
The completely humorous point aside of, getting older and being like, oh, my back cracked 3 extra times today. Guess it's a tail.
Yeah.
It is a tail. Your
is
back
a tail.
cracking is a sign that the
tail.
tail is coming in.
It's definitely a tail. It is not aging. You are TF.
Yeah, exactly.
But there's something so euphoric too about being able to explore different things in TF, and for myself personally, being someone who's very gender ambiguous, non-binary, being able to kind of explore both ends of things, being oh no, I'm turning into something that's very the epitome of everything masculine, the epitome of everything feminine. You get to kind of dance around the entire spectrum of everything. It's just, I don't know, it's a very good, and I don't know, I was saying this before, but it's just such a good versatile tool for self-exploration.
Oh yeah.
Summary, TF allows you dances with genders.
Yes. It's true. And I want to add on that as well, because that has definitely been my experience as well as someone of questionable gender. I think that the ability to experiment with different roles and actualize yourself within those roles in different ways, and to one of your points earlier, almost explore the ego death and becoming something else. It can just be really riveting to explore, not only as a thought process but also of imagining yourself in that way. And then there are things you can take away from those explorations to better yourself in real life. There's different ways to inhabit the forms that you wish you did. You can embody them in your life to some degree.
I also think from a cultural perspective, we have very kind of we have associations that we make with different species. Specifically talking about animal TF right now.
Yeah.
And TF content can kind of help you. It's a fun way to connect with that.
Yeah.
Whether you're just embodying it or whether you are flipping on its head, like something like a rat, where a lot of the time it's like 4 minutes and then you want to get more empowering.
Yeah, to summarize that, like, it's really interesting to explore TF from a cultural lens too, and explore the connotations that many species are given from different cultures, and then also potentially subvert them. I know I've certainly done that in pieces I've commissioned or done before too, and it can be really interesting because, again, like, and this is connecting back to our humanity in a sense, like we all have these specific impressions of like what a species is and what that means, when really, like, functionally we don't actually know. And so when you're engaging in like a transformation piece, you can flip that on its head, you can slice it, dice it a million different ways, you can make it whatever it is that you want it to be, and that can also be a tool of self-actualization. So
yeah, thank you very much for bringing up species things. I have a question for folks, and this is just a raise of hands. I want to see who all has either had more than one primary sona in sequence, or has at least one sona and multiple alternates. So raise your hand if either of those applies to you.
I think we have the whole room with their hands up.
It's the whole room.
Almost.
Okay, so let me ask then, for the folks who have changed their primary sona over time, did that coordinate with changes in how you perceived yourself or acted? Raise your hand if that's the case.
A good percentage too, yeah.
And for folks who use alternate sonas, do you use them to access portions of yourself that you can't with your primary one?
Yep. There we go.
Everyone!
We cracked the case, y'all. We did it. We've cracked TF.
We have drunk the LaCroix.
Literally, like, completely to that point, for myself, normally I have my main sona that basically at this point functions as my, like, artist sona else that I'm very used to using. So now, for coming to conventions and everything, I got a suit last year, and it was just a random suit, like, no attachment to it. And it's kind of become like, oh my god, I can go to a convention and just be this character. I don't have to be
anything else.
I don't have to be at work all the time. I don't have to be worried about like this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
I can just go enjoy things.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think especially for anyone with like any kind of, like, especially in the furry community, like all the freelance artists and everything, there's such a euphoric feeling of being able to finally separate yourself a little bit.
Yeah.
I don't think a lot of people think about, like, especially with TF artists and everything, like, how much going to a convention winds up being, like, you're still kind of at work.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah.
Unless you've really, like, given yourself sort of this space to separate, you almost, like, can't really fully relax. Which, I mean, touched again on an earlier point, like, it might be a little bit awkward. Somebody like, I'm not working right now.
Yeah.
Right. So, one example of different sona functions is a sona that kind of is a work sona, and a sona that is a leisure sona. Yeah, there you go. A mascot. Yeah,
love it.
Perfect. Does anyone else have a quick example of ways that two sonas work? Maybe like one sentence about one sona, one sentence about the other.
Yeah, that's...
So, to summarize, we have one person who says that the species of the sona that they're choosing often matches the species of the friend to whom they're speaking. Just kind of there's that kind of the organic shifts that come with social interaction.
Yeah. No, that's a really great point. And actually, I will say, like, now that you've kind of said that, there are definitely, like, dragon friends I have that I'm like, yeah, I'm the dragon with you. So that's actually a really great point. So, yeah. Being cognizant of time here, I think we actually have come up to the point where we can take some audience questions. So I don't know if folks wanted to come up and speak into the mic your questions. Did we have any takers for that? We do. Oh, amazing. So maybe just quickly say your furry name and your question.
Project into the microphone and out that way.
Okay, I think this is good?
Yeah.
Cool. I'm Casually Noted, and my question is, I know you were talking earlier about how you have kind of the vanilla furries that maybe aren't really into the TFE element of it. It's kind of more just like, I wish I was this character and I would get enjoyment out of that, versus TF where there's a fascination on the change. One of the things that I've noticed about myself over the years is that most facets of my life, I find a connection to TF in them, or I find myself interested in them through TF. But when I talk to people who aren't interested in TF, that's not a thing at all. Like, for example, like going to the gym and bodybuilding, for me, there's a certain element of fascination in building muscle and working out that way. But when I talk to other furries who are like maybe muscle furs, it's like, it's more about the like being healthy or the like looking fit, or with like kinks and stuff. I was really shocked to learn that, like, for example, most of my friends who are into pup stuff, that it's not about the idea of like changing into a dog. And in my head, I was like, okay, so the reason I like this is completely different than the reason that you like this. And so I was kind of curious if you guys have experienced that with your line of thought, and if you find that you sort of unconsciously or innately connect things to TF.
That's a great question. Thank you. Yeah, so I have definitely encountered that myself as well, in the sense of, you interact with people who have interests that are kind of adjacent to maybe the thing you're interested in, but they view it in a completely different way. And I always find that fascinating because it allows you to introduce new perspectives into this interest that you have. And sometimes I also I will reach... I will be like, Your Honor, this is a reach, but that's TF. I do that all the time because I have the TF brain rot. But, I think that, again, you can introduce really interesting perspectives by talking to people who maybe are interested into the adjacent thing that you are attaching meaning to, and get their thoughts on what it means to them. How did they interact with it? So the gym thing, I think, is a great example. There's obviously a different set of connotations for people who are just interested in going to the gym and may also coincidentally be furries. But if that's a TFE thing for you, well, you can incorporate those perspectives and turn it into something new. So I think that's a great point. And, I definitely have done that with my perspective on certain things. I will say, just as another example, because I keep joking about it, I'm big on pool toy TF, but I've talked to pool toy furs who are not into the TF element, and finding out what their interest in it definitely enhanced my interest in it as well. So I think there's a lot that can be said towards engaging with people who aren't necessarily looking at a specific interest from that lens, and then enhancing your own perspective on it as well. So yeah, good question.
Actually, kind of related to that, my favorite aquatic creature is the orca.
Yes.
And they're really fun. They have really cool shapes. They have really cool patterns. They were all the rage in pop culture in the 90s, which has had no effect on me whatsoever.
Free Willy.
What?
Free Willy.
But it's interesting to see how other parts of the fandom interpret them. For some people, it's latex adjacent because of the texture of the skin. That is not something that I'm into at all. I'm just okay. Or pool toy adjacent, because everyone's firsthand experience with an orca is floating on the public pool or what have you. Also not necessarily a thing I'm into, but something that is very common.
You're making me blush, Toledo.
Good. But yeah, and I already mentioned earlier, one of my things is comparative anatomy. It's really cool to think that whales came from carnivorous ungulates. They're Insetartiodactyla. They're more closely related to cattle than cattle are to hippos,
which is
blows
wild.
Your mind.
Absolutely wild.
And so my interest in comparative anatomy, which is related to TF, has nothing to do with these other people's interests.
No, that's a great point.
It's fun how humans are so diverse.
Yes.
Honestly.
Yes.
Yeah.
We love diversity of thought here in all senses. Did anyone have another question potentially from the audience? Oh, yeah.
If more than one person has a question, you can come up and
line up here too.
Yeah.
My name's Twycat, patron, all that. Woo. I know that there's a lot of popular moments in media that, like everybody's like, oh, that one, American Werewolf in London, all that stuff like that. That everybody's like, oh, fawn's over, Has there ever been one that has either been popular or one that's in like the spectrum that like you're just like, absolutely no. Like, this does nothing for me. Basically, give us your hot take.
Oh, I love hot takes. Thank you. Oh, this is a spicy question. Do you want to go first?
I don't have an example yet.
Okay.
I need some thought.
Okay. I'm gonna try and spitball on the spot. There have definitely been TFs in like media that I didn't really get anything out of and felt like kind of sheepish, being like, yeah, this doesn't really do it for me. I don't think this one was like super popular at the time, but when Hemlock Grove came out, there was a very gory werewolf transformation in that. Yeah, I agreed. Yeah, I was like not about that. Like, I can enjoy like body horror and stuff, like, don't get me wrong, but that was not my scene. I was like, no, thank you, por favor. So, that one I think was definitely one that I was not like super big on. If we want to get really spicy, the American Werewolf in London transformation, it has never really done much for me. I know. I'm showing my entire ass. I'm showing my entire ass to the chat right now. Listen, it's great it is still great. Like, I respect it from an aesthetic perspective, and like, it's incredible what they did with like the makeup and everything. Like, hats off to those people. I do like appreciate it as a media piece, but as for something that like was centrally interesting to me, it's never done it. And you know what? I will say one other thing. I think there is also almost like an internal backlash to the love that it got that I think drove me away from it, because there was a period of time where everyone would just repost the images from the transformation and be like, oh, this is so hot. Look at these pictures again. And I'm like, this is the 10th time I've seen these pictures this month. I do not give a shit anymore. This does nothing for me. So there's my spicy hot take.
So my incredibly mild take.
I mean, I'm the dragon here. I'm breathing fire, so.
Yeah. My incredibly mild take is that the transformation at the end of Beauty and the Beast, even though it is what the Beast wanted, so we have to respect his wishes, undermines the themes of the movie of coming to love something that, like, people don't think they should love.
Yes. Thank you.
Hooray! Mild takes.
Mild takes.
I will admit, though, a lot of werewolf stuff just doesn't do it for me. In part because I've never been into wolves.
Sacrilege.
I know. I'm a heretic. Burn me at the stake.
Shun.
Or just burn some steaks and feed them to me.
Yeah, I mean, you'd like that.
A vegetarian. But some of the themes that you often get with werewolves of like losing control, kind of losing who you are, like lapsing into violence, don't really those don't get me. Like I do like the American Werewolf in London one because it appeals to the comparative anatomist in me. But like, I watched the movie a couple months ago for the first time and I was like, I don't like this. I really don't like this. It is just...
It's a great movie, though.
I mean...
In my opinion. I don't know.
It's horror.
It's horror.
And I just... What appealed to me about transformation from the beginning was experiencing new things, developing empathy, like getting abilities that you wouldn't normally have. And like the traditional werewolf narratives don't have any of that. Like, give me the werewolf who like runs off and like fights Satan, like the guy in the Middle Ages who like went up to an ecclesiastical court and said like, yeah, I turn into a wolf every month and I fight off the demons. Like, let's get a movie about that guy, not only people who like go out and kill their friends.
I mean, I'm still waiting for the werewolf movie where they turn into a werewolf and then they run for Congress. So like, I would like to see that.
Yes.
Is it a movie?
Yeah, Werewolf of Washington.
God damn it, I need to
Werewolf
go
of Washington.
See this.
Okay, we have a recommendation.
I'm going to write this down on my list.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm going to take you first because you're waiting.
Hello, my name is Corwolf. Hi again. So my question is, for like comparative anatomy, what's your favorite part of the anatomy that you actually like seeing transformed. Like, I like the face because, one, the human skull compared to other animals is actually really interesting and like very close. If you look, it's very scary at points. But also, like, for expressions, it's very interesting to see like how you morph two different expressions and how you can convey the same expression between different species. So, like, what is your favorite anatomy part for that sort of thing?
Excellent question.
Faces are great, I will admit that. And as I've mentioned on a previous episode, anyone who can do a nose right, unlike the skeleton, noses are a fleshy bit that like is mushed onto our face. And if you look at the skeleton, noses don't exist in most of them. Like you look at a horse skeleton and there's this huge schnoz in front that is just like not seen there. Like, if someone can get the fleshy parts to actually change right in like that is really cool to me. It's just like I have a lot of respect for what you do. Yeah,
That's a great one.
yeah.
I know I'm like less on the comparative anatomy, but I will say that one of the things that I always enjoy seeing is like the ears, and particularly how people handle like the positioning of the ears, because like, you know, there's always like some people who like, and this comes into play I think a lot with like werewolf designs, but like, you know, where you put the ears on the werewolf can actually like really change the tone of where you end up going through and how you like depict maybe that shifting. You know, there was one actually that came up fairly recently. I guess this is minor spoilers, but in the Wednesday series on Netflix, there's a werewolf transformation in it. And honestly, it's adorably goofy in my opinion. But anyways, the ears in particular, the positioning was really interesting to me, and also the teeth. I also like the teeth, actually. That's another one. But
I'll also mention the interface between the skull and the neck.
Yeah,
because it really implies a lot about the stance of the creature that's being turned into.
Yeah.
And also just like the connection between the legs and the torso. Like there's all of these little subtle things, these subtle cues that we don't quite notice, but if they're carried off well, it tells you a lot.
Yeah. No, that's a great one.
Yeah.
I still have those questions. Oh, yes, you in the back.
What's the most interesting
Element
element?
you've seen recently in TF?
Element.
Yeah, most recent element. I think Eterbium. Okay.
Now you're making science jokes.
That was a really bad joke. It got one ha. Okay.
Well, I got it.
We'll go to the
groaned.
actual question.
I groaned, okay. Most interesting element.
I think about TF a lot, but I haven't followed much new stuff. I will admit. Oh,
That's
actually, well, speaking of mainstream stuff, I do like how many mainstream films are using transformation as like a central core element.
Yes.
Like you can have something like Luca, where people are trying it's a little bit like The Little Mermaid, but without the romance, and trying to figure out one's place, but also like not rejecting either place.
Yeah.
How to live in two bodies.
Or Turning Red. That's another great example.
I was
recent. Yeah. Okay. There you go.
just going to mention that. I love how Turning Red uses transformation as a means of creating empathy across generations.
Yeah.
Like, that is really interesting to me, and was totally lost on most of the discourse about it.
Yeah, there was a lot of bad discourse.
Yeah.
Sorry, I see. Oh, okay, gotcha. Sorry. Did you have something?
Oh, my only point, like, to go into Turning Red is just how much I think for obviously not everybody, but I think a very like large portion of TF people, whether like consciously or subconsciously, a lot of it does come from puberty. Whether it's a gender thing, just a general like personal expression thing, or anything else, like, you know, like growing up, there's so much there that, like, for me, watching that movie, I was like for me personally, it's not like a horny thing. It's almost like a just like it's kind of seeing yourself and being like, oh no, I understand. Like, that's embarrassing. Like, that's weird, and kind of like getting sort of where that came from for me, like later on in life.
Yeah.
So to summarize that, Turning Red deals with puberty, but not necessarily in a sexual way, but in like the ideas of embarrassment, of changes, of like how to figure out what this means. And we can relate to that. Actually, that's a great point. I remember like being mostly asexual. I didn't really have a typical puberty. Like, I wasn't developing crushes or anything, but I do remember like growing body hair and just being like, I don't want this. I don't want to have to shave. I don't want this stuff all over. And so, of course, the natural response was, I'm going to put it all over myself. I want a full coat of fur, not just this like weak human stuff.
To build, okay, sorry, not to necessarily build on that point, but to touch on Turning Red, and then I will get to your point, Core. One of the other things that actually I have noticed as an element in more recent TF media is there's been an increasing amount of diversity in who is being shown as going through transformation, and I think that is another thing that's really good. In the past, a lot of the TF narratives have focused on white dudes, basically. And I think that it's really good to show that, like, transformation as a concept can be interacted with from anyone. And it is always so much more meaningful when you get to see that depicted on the screen. And personally, I also felt seen as a Torontonian by that movie. Toronto represent. So, that was also really cool to me. Like, they nailed, like, the streetcars and everything really well. It was wild. Sorry, Core in the back. Yeah.
Oh, so Core said, as someone who doesn't like Poof TF, learned how to do a double jump in Poof TF. Great.
Yeah. That's excellent.
The Night Fury over here.
No, somebody mentioned it earlier, but I don't think that knowledge. But Wolfwalkers, very good.
Oh,
which one?
Wolfwalkers.
Oh yes, Wolfwalkers. Yeah, that's a great one too.
If I can go off on Wolfwalkers a bit.
Yes, go for it.
I loved how Wolfwalkers used transformation as a way to explore kind of geography and the human history of a place.
Yes.
So if you haven't seen it, Wolfwalkers tells the story of a British girl living in British occupied Ireland in the 1600s under Oliver Cromwell and the literally puritanical government.
Yes.
Literally, they were Puritans. And she comes across wolf shapeshifters who live in the woods, kind of as like indigenous people there, and develops this wolf changing power herself, and has to kind of negotiate her place as a basically colonial who now can empathize with the people who live in this place and see the flaws of her own culture. It was really interesting to see how those things were layered. And, okay, here is my nerdery coming out. There were places where, like, the local Irish would bring out, like, Catholic phrases. Or they would reference the local mythology. It was really neat to see the layers of culture depicted in that movie and to have them instantiated in these forms of wolves and shape-shifting. I love that movie. It's so good.
So good.
Hi, Patrick Coyote. So as someone who has been a TF writer and also commissioned a lot of TF art, one thing that I've noticed is that kind of based on the medium that the change is being delivered in, I will have more of an interest or more of a focus in different elements based on different mediums. Like if I'm commissioning art, I'll be like, hey, a lot of focus on the tail or a lot of focus on another specific thing. But when I'm writing something or reading something that someone else wrote, I might want to see something else described differently. And I just wanted to know if you had any thoughts on that or if you've experienced the same thing and just how the medium in which something is presented kind of changes your enjoyment or the way that you interface with it.
That's a great question. Thank you. I'll go first. I am primarily a photo manipulation artist. And one of the things that actually draws me towards commissioning drawn art is that there is a difference in terms of how things are depicted. And, something that I really like about drawn art versus like photo manipulation is the changes that you can depict can be a lot more fantastical. They don't have to be as grounded in reality, and it opens up a lot of possibilities that, unfortunately, because of how the medium is, like photo manipulated art often has to be very grounded in like avoiding the uncanny valley and really like focusing in on the realism of things. And drawn art doesn't have to worry about that. I mean, it can if you want to, but like I really like that you can explore it from that facet. And then with writing, I think, one of the things that I always key into with written stuff is you can explore the mental side of things a lot better than you can in a lot of other mediums, because you can give so many words to what someone is going through, and conversely, what someone is seeing if it's happening to someone else. So I would say that those are the things that really draw me to like different types of mediums.
Yeah, you took the words out of my mouth regarding writing. There are conventions that have grown up to show the mental state of someone who is transforming in art, but it can't really beat the written word. And one thing too, like comparative anatomy is easier to convey in drawing or in photo manipulation than it is in writing, because in drawing you can depict these things, but in writing you have to inhabit this headspace of the person, and the person wouldn't say something like, "My second metatarsal is lengthening."
If they did, I would read the shit out of that story.
Okay, we just need a transformation story in which the person is a veterinarian, and it's going very slowly so they can observe everything.
So you're telling me to call up Cameron, is what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay.
Got
it. Is there someone in the back first?
Yeah,
Sorry,
let's go
I'll
in the
let
back.
them go first.
So stories that are post-TF can focus on the person getting used to their new state, getting used to their new place in society, and adjusting. Is that a fair summary of your comment? Thank you.
Yeah. Do we have any other questions? Nope, never mind. Okay, fair enough. Wait, was that another hand?
The question underwent a poof TF.
Oh, spicy. In the back there. Yeah. The hand, yes, there's a hand. I do see a hand this time. What do we think about Merge TF from Zids? Do you want me to go first?
I don't really have many thoughts about it, aside from the fact that it can be used to explore a lot of really interesting themes.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, I'm definitely someone who has been interested in Merge TF. I think that there's a lot that can be explored from the perspective of how two separate mentalities can come into one, and what that means for each individual identity, and what that also means for the new identity. The quintessential Merge TF that I actually go back to is from Star Trek, and I think about the infamous Tuvix episode in Star Trek Voyager, and like the ethical quandaries of like, do we separate this new being? What does that mean for that being, and what does it mean to the initial people who to some degree died to make this new thing? There's just so many interesting ethical questions. I know this sounds really strange to be like, I really like the ethical questions around Merge TF, but like I do. Like there's so many interesting things to be mined from the questions around how do we treat this new person and what happened to the other people who came together to make this new thing. And there's such a diversity of how all these, this one topic can be handled by different artists that I think really speaks to the really like thorny questions that it can introduce. And also I think it's hot. So, all of those things come together.
One thing I actually just realized was that perhaps one of the first kind of TF adjacent stories I read might have involved that. Oh dear, we're in the dark.
We TF'd into the dark.
So if any of you remember the like 80s and 90s sci-fi fantasy author Bruce Coville, so he had
one person.
Oh, like, okay, go back. There's so much TF stuff in his things. It's like a wonder how we ever got through it. I guess we didn't. But he did a series that started with Aliens Ate My Homework, and the fourth book in that series, which is the first one that I read, began with the main character co-inhabiting the body of a six-legged, one-eyed with an eye stalk alien. This was a very confusing place to start. But it also illustrates some of the themes that can explore. Yeah. Like co-inhabiting like a space with an intelligence other than your own that you can't get away from. Like trying to learn about a new body. Figuring out like how this might work in perpetuity if it is going to. Like, themes that are relevant to all of us. How in the world do we live with our neighbor with whom we disagree about everything? Like, we're stuck here in the neighborhood. We can't make them move. They can't make us move. Darn it.
So to everything Toledo is saying, basically, it's interesting when you come up with like merging as a general concept. I know for myself and my partner, we used to be very into kind of like merging together in like a TF context. And then when we actually got together, it became less about that and more about two separate entities. Yeah, so sometimes it can kind of be just like a general like attraction thing too, and like wanting to be like part of something with another person. And that whole thing in general, like it's interesting kind of how that thing can sort of like shape and meld depending on the relationship you have with sort of the thing that you want to actually like meld with, basically.
I completely agree. Like, the context of the relationship between the two people at the beginning versus the end is so important, and I think that really adds just such an interesting dimension to how we view ourselves in relation to the other person in the now, and then also like how we engage with that concept theoretically. So I think that's a great point too. Well, we have gone well over time, actually, but that's okay because I don't think anyone else has this room after us. But first off, I want to say thank you to everyone who came out to listen to us yammer. This was actually far more interactive than I was anticipating, and that was thanks to a wonderful suggestion from Toledo. So thank you for that.
Yay.
And thank you, everyone, for contributing. Thank you. I really appreciate it. Toledo, where can people find you online?
You can find me on Twitter as Toledo the Horse. I am constantly building on the wreckage of Sona's past. And continuing that theme, you can find me on FA as Out of the Box. Out-of-the-box, BOKS, a reference to Antelope, my other Sona.
Amazing fun.
Those are my two main places, and if you go there, you'll find my link tree where you can find me everywhere else.
Amazing. And you can find me behind the dumpster of a Denny's waiting for 14 werewolves. No, I mean, you can find me in the usual places. But yeah, thank you so much for coming on with this. And again, thank you so much, everyone, for listening. As always, you can find us at the TFTuesday Pod on Twitter. And also, we have a Patreon, patreon.com/TFTuesday Pod. If you are interested in joining, we have monthly things where like people can help vote on topics and such, and you can get your name in the producer credits. So, that's fun. But yeah, thank you so much, everyone, for coming out. I hope you all enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. And hopefully we'll be back at MFF next year. I would like to do this again. It was a lot of fun. So, woo! Yeah. So thank you so much, everyone.